last video, we're on the home stretch. So what we're going to do is play with some simplification of complex numbers. And remember, a complex number is a number that has an imaginary part. So when you think of that word imaginary, you should be drawing some connections here. Imaginary means something we didn't think was possible. Well, we didn't think it was possible to take the square root of a negative number. So an imaginary number is that square root of a negative number, and anytime we take the square root of a negative number, we have to take out an I, okay? So, first example, the square root of -5. So right now, something should be going off in your brain that says, no, 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 you can't take the square root of a negative number, when in fact, we know that we can take the square root of a negative number. So here's how you simplify it. In this first example, I'm going to show you the mathematical way, and then I'm going to give you a little bit of a shortcut, okay? In math, anytime we have the square root or cube root or anything like that of some number, we can rewrite it as the square root for -5 would be, really it's -5, or I'm sorry, it should be -1 times 5, because is it -1 times 5 equal to -5? So this is the same thing as this, okay? Well, we can further break this out because these two terms are being multiplied. This is the same thing as the square root of -1 times the square root of 5, right? So now what you should see is this part. The square root of -1. We know what the square root of -1 is now. The square root of -1 is equal to I. So to simplify this, this part is really just I, and then times the square root of 5, okay? Now, I'm going to show you kind of the shortcut that you don't have to do this longer mathematical way every time. In this example, the square root of -4. So here's the shortcut. If you see a negative underneath the radical, that means that you can get rid of that negative underneath the radical, underneath the square root bar, by taking out an I. So we're going to make this negative, the square root of this negative, we're going to make it I. And then that means that underneath the square root bar is just now a +4. Because we needed to get rid of that negative underneath the square root bar, we make it I. So now we have I times the square root of 4. Well, what is the square root of 4? It's 2, but don't say 2. It's 2 or -2. So we can now rewrite this part, the square root of 4, we rewrite that as plus or minus 2. Because remember, the square root of 4 is +2 or -2. And then don't forget your I times I. Now here's the reason why we write I after any constant numbers, because we kind of treat it like a variable, okay? Here, we wrote it in front of the square root bar because when there is a square root bar or a radical, you write the I in front of it, okay? So last example here is a little bit different because this 2 is being multiplied by the square root of -9. Which it's fine. It's kind of like a greatest common factor. We really just ignore it until the end. So we want to deal with this part, the square root of -9. So let's take care of that first. And then we will highlight the 2 in green so that we don't forget it at the end. So the square root of -9. First of all, let's take care of the negative, and we take care of this negative underneath the square root bar by taking out an I, okay? So that will make this go away, and then that means we have the square root of 9. Well, the square root of 9, remember, let me rewrite this one step right there. So the square root, I square root of 9. The square root of 9 is equal to plus or minus 3. So now it's really plus or minus 3i. That's what this becomes. And I can't simplify this part anymore. But now, don't forget, we have this +2 that's being multiplied to this. So I need to go ahead and multiply that by +2. And really all you're doing is multiplying the 3 and the 2. So that's plus or minus 6i. And that's how we simplify 2 square root of -9. Okay? Again, feel free at any moment to pause, rewind, go back as you need to. So you have 4 problems on your paper. The first, apply it problem, I'm actually going to work with you together on, and then for the other 3, you can use the examples from all 3 videos to help you if you need to. So find the roots of 2x squared plus 32. So the first thing I think is roots. So that means I need to set my y value equal to 0. okay? I'm going to solve this like the new way, which means I'm going to get x by itself. So to get x by itself, I need to subtract 32 from both sides, so that gives me negative 32 is equal to 2x squared. And then I have to divide by 2. Okay, we haven't seen a coefficient of x squared yet in these videos, so don't forget that this has to be done first or next. Okay, so that gives me x squared is equal to negative 16. Now, notice I have something squared is equal to a negative number. Well, that means it's going to be a complex number. And at this point, to solve for x squared, I have to take the square root of both sides. The square root of x squared is just x. And then here, for the square root of negative 16, remember there's a square root of a negative number. So I know that I'm going to have to take out an I here, and then that's going to leave me with I times the square root of 16. Don't forget, you need to ask yourself if you can actually take the square root of this number. Can I take the square root of 16? Yes, the square root of 16 is positive 4 or negative 4. So this actually becomes plus or minus 4, and then we'll put the I after the 4. Okay, and it's very important that you don't write the I in front, because then it would look like I plus or minus 4, when really it's I times positive or negative 4. So these would be your roots. If you want to write them as coordinate points, it looks a little weird, but we write it the same way. It would be positive 4i, comma 0, and negative 4i, comma 0. But generally, you'll see it written like this when we talk about imaginary roots. And remember, these are two roots. There's a positive 4i and a negative 4i. So that concludes the final video. Make sure that you complete the 3 practice problems after this, because that's what we'll check, part of what I'll check in next class.